Let's talk about my journey to become a clinical psychologist. Clinical psychologists assess, treat, and diagnose mental, emotional, and behavioral issues. There are clinical psychologists that work in private practice, in hospitals, in inpatient eating disorder clinics, in forensic settings, in college counseling centers. What you actually do as a psychologist, like your day-to-day, depends largely on where you work. So if you work in private practice, your day is going to look a little different than if you worked in a hospital compared to if you work in a forensic facility. I'm going to tell you about my journey to become a clinical psychologist. Hopefully it will shed some light on maybe what it's like. Everybody's journey is a little different. Before I was a psychologist, I was an emergency medical technician on an ambulance. I loved that job. It was so fun. We had such a blast. I learned so much. I thought I wanted to become an MD or a DO. I decided against it for many reasons, but the most notable reason is because I wanted to establish like a long-lasting relationship. And it's not to say that physicians can't do that. When you're a psychologist or a therapist, you're really having a lot of conversations, you're listening a lot, you're really learning a lot about that person's story. And that's really what I wanted. If we go back in time, when I think about high school, I did not get the best grades and I was really intimidated by the thought of going to college. So I started with community college and I ended up doing pretty well, better than I thought, to be honest with you. So then I applied to a 4-year university just to finish my bachelor's in psychology. And I worked at the time. I was an emergency medical technician and I also worked at a group home. At that point, after getting my bachelor's, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I know that I didn't want to work at the group home forever. I really enjoyed it, but it just wasn't like a long-term plan for me. So I went to Walden University online. It was CACREP accredited at the time. I think it still is. And I thought I was going to become an LPC and do some counseling and, that whole thing. And I ended up deciding against it. I got my master's and then I ended up moving to Phoenix, Arizona. So I worked under a master's level counselor and I really enjoyed it. I was doing in-home therapy at the time, going to people's homes and providing them with therapy there. It was a really fun experience because I moved to Phoenix and I had no idea where anything was and I got to know the city pretty quick. And then I really sat down and I thought, like, what do I actually want for my life? Do I want to keep doing this? It reminded me a lot of being on the ambulance. I was just kind of on the go 24/7. Like I didn't have an office. So I decided to apply to a doctorate program in clinical psychology. I was researching it for a little bit before I applied and I ended up getting in and it was great. That was an accelerated program. It was a 4-year program and they crammed everything into 4 years. So it was pretty intense, to be honest with you, for me personally, for someone who wasn't really good at school. And if I back up to, I took the GRE and I didn't get the best grades on the GRE because I'm not really good at math. So those grades were low. So if you are going for your clinical psychology degree and just say your GREs are low or just say you're not really good at standardized testing, those things are very important and they don't really determine if you're going to be a good clinician. When you're in the room with a client, standardized testing goes out the window. You need the baseline knowledge and don't be intimidated if that's just not your thing. So my grad school experience. So got into the program, 4-year program. The last year is internship. The first year is basically all academic, well, mostly academic, and then there's a clerkship at the end. Clerkship is kind of like a prerequisite to practicum. Practicum is basically like your first clinical rotation for a whole year or 6 months, depending on what the site is offering and what they need at the time. And what my school did was they asked us what our interests were, but they didn't really let us choose our practicum sites because they wanted us to be well-rounded. So I worked with a lot of people that I never thought that I would work with. And I'm actually really glad that that happened. I could look back and say I was really excited about that because if I would have just chosen inpatient or SMI and stuff like that, I wouldn't have gotten the well-rounded experience that I needed now in private practice. Like, you just don't know where you're going to end up. So trusting the process is important. So I did my clerkship, then I had 2 practicums, then I went on internship. While you're doing all of these clinical experiences, you're gaining hours, intervention hours and assessment hours, and you need a certain amount of hours to actually apply to internship in the match system. It's the same system that residents use, people who want to become physicians. So picture yourself for 3 years, gaining all these hours, right, to apply to internship, and you have to have a certain number of hours, certain number of assessment reports, certain number of publications or research experiences. Also have to pass all of your competency evaluation or competency exams. There's comp exams. For some people, they have either defended their entire dissertation or proposed their dissertation. And that's for some internship sites, they want that as well. So at the time that I was applying to internship, I had my entire dissertation defended. Everything was done. I had a little bit of a leg up with that. So they knew that I wasn't going to be working on my dissertation while I'm on internship. I could fully focus. And I did that on purpose because for me, I know that if I have a deadline, I start to get really anxious and then I'm not effective. So I always set my deadlines earlier than, and that's with everything, all assignments, everything like that. I always submitted them early. And it wasn't so much to be an overachiever as much as it was to to know that I just don't work well under pressure when it comes to academic stuff. Ended up defending my dissertation before I got on an internship. It passed with distinction, which if you are unfamiliar with what that means, it's an academic honor. You know, it says that your dissertation was like really, really, really good. So then I am in Arizona. I moved there before I got into this program and I didn't want to leave. I really enjoyed Arizona. I grew up in New York and New Jersey area, and moving to Arizona was really helpful in figuring out what I wanted to do and who I wanted to become. It was really crucial in helping me form my identity, my professional and personal identity. If any of my grad school friends are listening to this, they'll laugh, but I applied to places only in Arizona. And everybody thought I was nuts. They were like, you have to match and you only applied to like 3 sites. And I'm like, I know. At the last minute, I did apply to a couple of sites in New Jersey because I missed my brother. At the time, I was like, oh, it'd be so nice to be close to him again. And I ended up, not getting into any of those anyway. They weren't good fits. And you really should only apply to sites that that you could find yourself at least that you could imagine yourself at. I ended up getting my top pick, which I was shocked about. I think it just goes to show, even if you had an undergrad experience that you weren't so fond of, or maybe classes were hard or something like that, you're still able to succeed in grad school. I thought I was going to need a tutor and all that stuff. I'm so interested in psychology, and I was so interested at the time that I felt this desire to learn more and this desire to like lean in and get assignments done. It was weird. It was different than undergrad, because I think that in undergrad you have to take all those general ed classes and stuff, and when you go for a doctorate in psychology, it's like all things that you might use. Like everything that you read, learn, experience is something that you might encounter in the field. Went on an internship at the VA. That was probably the best thing to ever happen to me, to be honest with you. I never thought I was going to work with veterans. I have a couple of friends who are veterans. My partner's a veteran, and I was just thinking like, I know nothing about this population other than what people have told me. We have nothing in common. I think it might be hard to connect. I don't really know what it's like to be a veteran. I don't know what it's like to be overseas. I had no experience working with veterans. And the point was I had interdisciplinary experience. I worked at inpatient. I was an EMT for a while, obviously. I just had the clinical experiences to help me. So when I got to the VA, I was on the health psychology track. So I did primary care. I was also in the general outpatient center. I worked with sleep a lot. That's where I fell in love with sleep. I was a DBT group facilitator. I also co-facilitated the transgender support group, which was, again, one of my, I can't say enough about my training. It was so challenging and so rewarding. I thought I was going to stay at the VA. I thought I was going to retire at the VA. So did internship, also took the EPPP early. So that's notable and a little different than how people normally do it. Again, I didn't want to deal with that deadline thing. I took the EPPP, which is our licensure exam, and I failed the first time, and I was like, oh fuck. I failed by like 5 points, and I was devastated. I was like, oh my God, and like we talked about earlier with standardized testing, you just think that there's something wrong with you. You're like, oh God, was I meant to do this? And really what was happening was when I took data about the strategy that I was using to study for the EPPP, I was focusing so much on content and not much on my strategy when I was in there. So I could get it down to 2 answers, like a 50-50, and I would struggle right after that because I would overthink. So I had to kind of like decide more quickly, and the more quickly that I decided, and I just used my gut feeling, my intuition, I was getting like almost like 90% on the practice exams. And then I took it again, and I ended up passing. I think I took it like a couple of months later. So graduated from my program and graduated from internship, and I ended up doing an optional 1-year post-doctoral fellowship at that same VA because I liked it so much. And I did want to stay in Arizona, so I was really focused on finding sites that would keep me there. I ended up moving out of Arizona anyway, right? So you just never know you never know where life will bring you. Did my fellowship. I worked in primary care, and I did insomnia treatment as well. It was so fun. I loved it. And then I ended up moving to the Midwest, ended up moving to a VA out here, loved it, and then COVID happened, and I had a couple of family members get sick. It was just, my life kind of got a little chaotic for a bit, and I was like, I can't even work full time because I have to help my family. I got to do all these things. So I ended up leaving the VA. It wasn't a decision that was easy for me because I just felt such a connection, and I wanted to become a supervisor and train interns. My dog is sneezing. You good? Are you good? Okay. I wanted to, bless you, bro. But I ended up going into private practice during the pandemic, and wow, what a change. I've worked in private practice, telehealth since then, and I never thought I would ever work in private practice ever. To be honest, if I'm really honest with you, I kind of looked down on it for a little bit when I was in my training, because so many people were like, oh, a hospital's where it's at, all the benefits, there's all these things. Like, they really sold it. They really sold me on working at a hospital for the eternity of my career. And that's just not how it happened. And it's a privilege to say that I was able to change jobs and work in private practice. I also think that I didn't realize how burnt out I was. When you work for a hospital, you don't realize it. And it's nobody's fault. It's just how the system is. And I just decided I can't keep doing this. You know, it's exhausting. So I realized all of that after I left, and it was a good transition. I could talk more about my experiences in private practice if y'all want. So just comment and let me know. But that was a really, really brief overview of my journey. If you have any specific questions, let me know, and I'll either make a video or I'll answer your comment. I appreciate y'all being here. I think I'm at about 2,000 subscribers right now. Thank you so much for being here. And I base all of my videos on what you want. So you just tell me any questions that you have or what you want, and I will make a video on it. So thanks for being here. I hope you have a great day.